So in this video, I'm going to discuss the actual closing, the day of the closing, when you're actually going to take ownership of the property and what happens. Um, in the week or so leading up to the closing, what's going to happen is the title company, who is they're the company that did the title search and insurance on the property. They are also going to administer and coordinate the entire closing process between the buyer, seller, and their attorneys, and the buyer's lender and the seller's lender on paying off if there's a current mortgage, paying off that current mortgage. So the title company is the party that basically distributes all of the funds and closes out the sale. They also deal with all the filing of the deeds with the county and recording the deed, and they work in conjunction with the attorneys on that. So what happens the day leading into the closing, usually about 3 to 5 days prior to the closing, as a buyer, you're going to hear from the title company on the exact number that you need to bring to closing for your closing costs. So you'll get the closing cost number along with the amount of remaining deposit that's owed. So they'll let you know, okay, you were buying a property for $500,000. We already have $50,000 in escrow for your first deposit, and now we need the remaining 20% of that deposit. So we need another $50,000 plus, say, $25,000 in closing costs. So you're going to bring a certified check for $75,000 made out to XYZ to the closing. So they'll let you know the amount that needs to be brought to closing. As we get closer to the actual closing date, you're also going to want to coordinate utility transfer. So set up for the day of the closing, gas and electric, water and sewer, if it's applicable. If it's a condo, it may be included, but the water and sewer, you're probably going to also want to coordinate your cable and internet installation for the day after the closing. So you're going to want to get all those things lined up. You're also going to want to make sure that you have your condominium policy insurance or homeowners and policy insurance effective and in place for the day of the closing, so that when you take over ownership, the property is insured. So once that closing date and time are set, you'll want to coordinate with your agent, your buyer's agent, for a final walkthrough of the property. And we usually do the final walkthrough of the property once the property is vacant. So when the seller has moved out or the tenant living there has moved out and it's vacant, we will do a final walkthrough either the day before or the morning or day of the closing. So we want to make sure that the property is in the same condition that you assumed you were buying it in when you went to contract and when you were last there. We want to make sure there was no damage, things were not removed that were supposed to be included in the sale, etc. So the final walkthrough could take anywhere from 15 to 30, 40 plus minutes. I've had them take a while. You also want to make sure that any items that were agreed to be addressed by the seller as far as home inspection, they were handled and that are done properly. And if there wasn't something handled or done properly, you'll talk to your attorney about that, and they'll most likely handle that at the closing table, either in the form of some sort of credit or an escrow until that item is corrected. So we do a final walkthrough the morning of or the day of the closing. When you go to the closing itself, you're probably going to have to arrive an hour before the seller's attorney arrives to sign all the mortgage documents. So if you are obtaining a loan, that could take about 30 to 45 minutes just to go through all the mortgage documents and disclosures. The title company will tell you what to bring as far as like IDs, any sort of documentation that they're going to require for you to be there. That they also need a copy of. So they're going to sign everything, and then they'll do the signing of the deed transfer and the actual, what we call the closing statement, which you will receive that closing statement a couple days before closing to review. But you and the seller and the buyer's attorney will review everything on that closing statement and sign off on it. Once everyone's in agreement on everything on the closing statement and it's signed off on, the title company will receive the wire of funds from your mortgage company, along with any deposit money that's already sitting in escrow and the deposit money that you bring to closing, and they will coordinate with the seller's bank to pay off the seller's mortgage. So all of the distribution of the funds is handled by the title company, and then you will receive the keys once everything is distributed. You will also receive any sort of copies of paperwork, and then once the final deed is recorded, usually within a few months, you'll receive a copy of the deed in the mail from your either the title company or your attorney's office. So if there's any problems at the closing where numbers don't look right or there's a problem with the lender, the title company will get on the phone with the bank to handle all those issues. But in generally, the closing time frame, the process of actually closing, if you have a loan, takes about an hour to an hour and a half. I have had closings with no loan involvement where they take about 30 minutes or not even. But if you have any further questions about this, please let me know. Thank you.